Okay. We're good to go.
Call to order the City Council Finance and Human Resource Committee meeting for 6 p.m. Monday, November 8th, 2021. Acknowledging we're about 1 minute early. Anybody joining us on YouTube? Call to order. Council member Mark Davies. Here. Council member Scott Harrington. Here. And Council member John Rafter. Here. Is there any changes that are required for previous meetings minutes? So no heads bobbled. Minutes as provided. Number 1 on our agenda tonight is special guest, previous council member Larry Malone. He's come back to update us on a white paper that he wrote, I believe, in 2012. 15. Yeah. The data was collected in 12. Okay. Yeah. In 2015, just to kind of expand upon our revenue seeking sources for 2021 and 2022 moving forward. So Larry, when you're ready, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Len. It's great to be back. So let's get right down to it. I think, and I thought at the time, that this is a fabulous idea. I think it's actually a very good public policy proposal. And we had a lot of interest previously. So basically the study looks at New York and it looked at upstate New York small cities. And so you see the other cities there, Cortland, Elmira, Geneva, Oneonta, Oswego, and Plattsburgh. And what they have in common is they all have 30,000 residents or less. They host a 4-year college. Some of them have SUNYs. Some of them have SUNY only. Some of them have a private school as well. Some of them have a private school and no SUNY. And they all have professional police and fire departments. So for example, Brockport is not in there because they do not have a professional fire and police department. They all face common challenges coming out of the 1960s and 1970s. Their economies were transformed, major manufacturers left, that correlated to a population decline. That then created a vacant housing situation. And all of them had a rising share of tax exempt properties, in part due to the presence of the colleges that were in their midst. So the decline in manufacturing brought about a shift to services in government, large private employers. You know, we can go around New York State and see some of these who exited these communities. And that was part of a national decline where in 1970, 26% of all people worked in manufacturing. And by 2010, we're only about 10%. So let's look at the population decline. For all 6 cities, the population declined from 1970 to 2010, and I haven't completely updated the study, I didn't have time, was 14%. Oneonta was right there on the mark with a 13% decrease from 16,000 to about 14,000. And now let's look at the tax exempt properties. So this is the percentage of full value property that was exempt for selected cities in 2012, when I most recently looked at. I mean, the most recent data that were available. Most of the stuff comes from the New York State Controller's Office. It could be easily updated. I could update it for the council if you gave me a couple of weeks. So Geneva's pretty high with 59%. We're right behind them with 52% at the time. And everybody's over 33% in our 6 communities. I've also, I should note, presented this in Oswego and Elmira to their city councils in the past, and they were very interested in this. So when we have this population decline and we have the manufacturing decline, it also, what was going on was the rise of SUNY. The plan from SUNY, which part of the motivation in doing this in the first place is my undergraduate thesis, which we had to do at SUNY Purchase, was on the creation and evolution of the SUNY system. I graduated in 1979. I interviewed people in Albany, I went through the state archives, it was an extensive study I'm bragging for an undergraduate. But the plan for SUNY was linked to an economic development plan right from the get-go in 1960 with this HELD report to promote the growth of upstate New York and New York in general. The interstate highway system, which was also built at the time, every four-year campus in the SUNY system is within 10 miles of an interstate highway, a 4-lane interstate highway. And again, all that construction was done. The planning assumed that the students would be from New York State, would go to SUNY, move back to their communities or stay in New York State, and the economy would thrive. That was the major assumption of the plan. That reality didn't come to be. Over the last decades, the SUNYs did in fact replace the for-profit manufacturing and commercial enterprises that were very dominant in these communities. But the part where the students would be retained in New York State and perhaps lead to a more thriving economy, there was a lot of out-migration. That is very difficult to quantify though, but could be done. So this slide is perhaps one of the ones you would be really interested in. So we've got, did I go too fast here? Nope. Am I going forward or backwards? Sorry. I'm going to just locate myself here. Sorry. Oh, now I think I'm going nowhere. Carry on. Where'd you go?
Oh, yeah, it froze for a second.
Okay. Maybe I went too fast here.
It was like it's a-
Oh, it's thinking.
Yeah,
Larry, what was the name of that report?
The HELD report. I actually have a copy of that somewhere. Let me see if I can fill in some of the gaps here based on where we were. So one of the main findings here is going to be that in all of these communities, and one of my favorite slides, I think it's that, okay, there we go, thank you. Whoops. One of the main findings is we're used to thinking that, and does anyone know offhand, I didn't check what the 2020 official population of Oneonta is.
Decreased by 822.
So we're down to maybe 13,100 or something.
Or something, it's actually 13,079.
Okay, so we've had a further decline in the 10 years since this was reported. But here's what's interesting, and when I was on the council, which I really wanted to emphasize, is we think the population is now 13,000 and a little under 100. But that includes the students. That actually includes the students. So the year-round property owning resident population in 2010 was a lot less than that. It was we had 7,418 students. So it was more in the neighborhood of a shade over 6,000.
So, yeah, quick question on that. You must have dived deep into this. How do you know that to be factual? Where did you go to get that information? Knowing that the students were counted here and not back home.
Right, it's the National Center for Education Statistics. They have that data. So they have full-time enrollment at Hartwick and SUNY.
Well, what you don't know, because we've never been able to get a handle on, is we know that there were 7,400 students enrolled, but we don't know how many of them got caught up in the census here in Oneonta.
Right.
That's an unknown.
Right,
That's what I was asking.
right,
How do I know who
Right.
actually got counted?
right, because I'll get to that in a minute. Let's hold up that just.
I just didn't know if you went into the elementary schools and the
No.
primary education system to
No.
figure out how many kids were actually
No,
residing here.
no.
Okay.
No, not, you couldn't drill down that far enough. So all these communities that were under 39,000, see, I did the 39,000 so I could get Elmira in there, frankly. And remember, they also had to have a publicly funded municipal fire and police force, these communities. All of these communities have a rather significant student population as a percentage of the total, except for Elmira, which only has Elmira College, and Geneva, which only has Hobart William Smith. Okay? The Cortland only has SUNY Cortland. Oswego only has SUNY Oswego, and Plattsburgh only has SUNY Plattsburgh. So here's something, Len, in terms of maybe what you're getting at. It also goes to the argument of why students should have to pay something. That's my basic argument. Contribute toward public safety, okay? Because they're a substantial consumer of public safety. That's the kind of bottom line. And given how much they consume the public safety, their presence means that in the case of Oneonta, and I would argue all those communities, their presence means that our fire force and our police force is correspondingly, by some degree, larger than it would be were they not here. But they're consuming the services. And so I believe also the other part of the argument is students are actually treated as residents because they're here for 9 months a year. They, according to the Census Bureau, this is their residence. This is their primary residence. And in terms of what the mayor was saying, this is where they should be tracked down and counted here. Okay, that's one. They also are entitled to register to vote here as residents, according to federal voter law. But in the meantime, they're adding a huge burden to our public safety. And sometimes I think about striking that term in quotes. In economic terms, they're free riders. They're free riders on public safety. Living here 9 months a year, consuming, and one part of this study, to expand it in the case of us and Oneonta, is, you might be able to drill down and find out what percentage of those services they're consuming in terms of fire response calls, fires themselves, emergency calls, and so on. But that's another. Okay. So then the next thing to do is look at how these communities, these 6 communities and us, are burdened by having those high public safety percentages. So this is the actual percentage of all expenditures, and this is based on 2012, but could be updated, of all of our expenditures for all city services. So back in 2012, in Oneonta, public safety was 44% of our total budget. And we, as you see, were the highest in the state. Cortland was second, Elmira and Geneva were not far behind in Plattsburgh. Those are all pretty high numbers when you think of it. But it points to the notion that the students are there, you need the public services to keep them safe because they're residents. They're living here for most of the year. This is just a tweak on that, where I took public safety spending per capita in those cities. And Oneonta is there at 454. So on a per capita per citizen basis, we are spending, and that includes the students, okay? We're spending $454 per person. That of course was back in 2012. But again, this could be updated. I don't expect much has really changed. Some of the numbers were changed. The point, I think, remains pretty much the same. My proposal was to implement a $100 fee, $50 a semester. It was also for private universities as well, not public universities only. A $100 fee assessed through the colleges, the private, and this is a very key point, the colleges in the private sector would have to do this voluntarily. Or you, how can I do this? The colleges would have to cooperate. The private colleges would have to cooperate. SUNY Central could handle it on that end. So when I say this could happen tomorrow for SUNY, as I said to some before the meeting actually started, this could happen tomorrow for SUNY if the chancellor and the board said, there's going to be They're gonna be $50 semester. I mean, the students pay fees for everything, but you just assess a $50 fee per student. So back in,
Can I ask a question?
yes, please.
Are you talking about a student fee, or are you talking about the university?
I'm talking about the university perhaps would collect maybe at the local level. So Oneonta, SUNY Cortland, they would assess for every full-time enrolled student a $50 fee per semester, and then turn the revenue over to the city.
You have no cost to the SUNY system.
No.
This will be paid for by.
Families,
Those are-
families and students, another $100 a year. And so what was interesting, it says there, if you look at Oneonta, for 2013, our original deficit, because I was here, was $83,000. But that's a funny number because if you remember the era of Mayor Miller, we used to have kind of or it seemed to me that we had one set of expenditures, and then we started really cutting everything we needed to cut to get down to the point where we were drawing out of the general fund, the remainder. And so we're the low number up there. But for this year, it would have generated almost $750,000 in revenue. And when I brought this to Oswego and presented it to their city council, because they had an original deficit of 1.4 million, they were really interested. Soon after I published this with the New York State Economics Association, I went up and talked to them. So here's another part of the history, and I have packets for all of you. I have the paper, the tables, the data are there. As I said, I would offer to update if you're really interested. It was published with the New York State Economics Association, but Senator Seward in the 2015-16 legislative session introduced a bill, S-4643. It had corresponding sponsorship in the Assembly. And there were a lot of co-sponsors on this bill. I mean, the bill's here, you'll see them. And it was really a sort of outright state. There was a different formula, which I won't get into. But instead of doing the fee and assessing it the way I suggested, it would be really a state grant in kind, let's say. And he was successful in, the total statewide cost of the bill was $7.7 million at the time, and Oneonta would have received $415,000. The bill died in committee, or stayed in committee, never came out of committee in either the Assembly or the Senate. But in 2016, he kind of got one of those member items to pilot test this idea. That was and I have the press release and so on. And so Oneonta received $200,000 in Cortland, where there's also a very strong advocate in the finance office, Matt Cook. He's all over this. He had a proposal of his own, and the idea was to test the idea, but that's when it died. Okay, so
Well, we got it for 3 years. I believe.
we did get it for 3 years. Oh wow! Oh, so it was renewed.
And then actually what happened, Larry, it's very strange, and I never figured out, because COVID hit me, I kind of lost track. But the year we didn't get it, some others did.
Oh really?
New Paltz
Huh.
got $200,000 the year we didn't get it, and I think Rockport got $200,000. So I don't know what took place that it got shifted. So it wasn't, originally it was just Oneonta and Cortland for the first 3 years, nobody else. And the others were all complaining, why is Oneonta and Cortland getting this money and we're not?
Yeah.
And then out of the clear blue, on the 4th year, neither Oneonta nor Cortland received the money, but I think Rockport and New Paltz did. And without an explanation, and then the following year, nobody received.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
But the idea never On either end, like a student fee or a regular formula with an appropriation for certain,
The
It-
pilot.
yeah, never got past that. Kind of got tied, frankly, got tied up in politics in a
And
sense.
I don't know how much of it was that we stopped getting it around the same time that Jim got sick.
And the majority of the Republicans was lost in the state senate.
But it was, yeah. Maybe before that, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
So it just disappeared.
So I have a full packet for all of you. And so it includes my paper with, which is, there's a little bit more in there. And it also includes the Seward press release from the original grant in 2016. And then it has a copy of the bill, which wasn't picked up. And the only thing I can really say in part is, we made an effort with Meg Hungerford, Dick Miller, myself, and I think Chip Holmes, who was the council representative. We went to NICOM. They thought the idea was fabulous, but it's gonna need that kind of muscle. It's going to need, this won't be any kind of immediate solution, I don't think. Because it really gets tied up in politics, but
So why did it die in committee?
I
What
have
was the
no,
reason for why it died in committee?
Because you have more.
I mean, it's no cost to the state, yet they turned around and did.
it was a cost.
Five
So
years worth of supplementing from the state budget. where
the
they-
Seward proposal is different. The Seward proposal the bill would not have assessed the student fee. It had a formula, and so the money was coming directly from the state.
Oh, okay. So that's why they looked at it as a $2.2 million.
You know, the other thing is that the majority of state legislators come from areas that don't have, that are affected by this, but yet their constituents are sending their kids to these schools. And so
Right.
they see, their constituents see it as a tax upon them. So those legislators are not going to support this because of the tax on their region that they represent doesn't benefit, and yet the people who live or sending their kids to Oneonta will be taxed. So,
And I frankly chose the $100 number because it's kind of tiny as a
Yeah.
student fee.
Yeah.
And
they pay more than that and just exercise fees or whatever they call it
Right.
nowadays.
right,
Gym fees.
right.
we
So
can bring this up with NICOM again. You know,
Why didn't NICOM get behind it?
I don't know. I mean, you would think, I think it's a,
I can ask, we have a legislative priorities meeting
right.
coming up for this year, the first week in December.
Mhm.
I can ask. I can ask what happened to this, and is there any support for pursuing it?
I just think it's a really reasonable idea.
Here's
And
what-
all of these communities are in the same
Here's what happens
position.
at NICOM, what they, it is decided by the membership mayors. What we do every year is we have a legislative priority. There's an agenda of things to support. And those who attend the meeting vote on which ones to support. And then puts most of their work into supporting those priorities. So they listen to their membership. And if it is something that ranks high with the total membership or something to support, they support.
This would need, I'm sorry to interrupt, this would need some number of weeks for me to update
Mhm.
in terms of the presentation, the paper logic, the tables. It's a good time to update it because we just had the census. The data have to be gotten from the state controller's office in terms of municipal filings and so on. But we could do it, and I mean, I have student support that would be able to help me do it, and I could get it turned around, and if you folks really want to try to pursue it.
So kind of looking back, do you think that you would have approached it differently?
No, I thought we really went full stop. In the words of the Europeans, we really went full out to this. We went to NICOM. We seem to get a good response. We seem to have the interest of our Senate representative, who basically took it and fashioned another bill, I think that was more of a hybrid proposal with because he also represented Cortland.
Mhm.
And the finance director, who still is there, I checked the other day in Cortland, Matt Cook, he was very interested in this idea. So another approach potentially is to find allies with the finance people in these communities. And you can also extend, I mean, I can extend it. I asked myself, okay, why wouldn't Schenectady be interested in this? You know, they have Union College and they have Mohawk, they have Schenectady Community College. They have colleges, but I don't think it's quite as big a burden for them. The finances of the city of Troy are not terrific. A friend of mine was the mayor for 12 years, Mark Pattison. They've always struggled, and Troy has always struggled with this. They have RPI, they have Hudson, I don't think Hudson Valley is within the.
In Troy,
But-
HCC.
Yeah, but you have Russell Sage, so you have lots of communities beyond these. I just tried to keep it kind of simple and to demonstrate the impact it would have, because they all 6 of those communities had more than a third of their municipal budget dedicated to public safety. And like I said earlier, the irony is I did not include Brockport because they don't have, I mean, Brockport relies on the state police, and I don't think they have they don't have a fire department. I think it may be volunteer, but it was right after this, I think, or a year or two after, that Brockport had that terrible thing where they had the rivalry game with somebody, and corresponding with alumni weekend, people were downtown drinking, they went into the streets, they were calling in state police from all quarters around that part of the state in order to put down what was a riot. And so other communities could potentially benefit. I mean, extra revenue, maybe they do hire some full-time police and fire.
I don't see where any municipality couldn't benefit from the use of this revenue.
Yeah.
I mean, there's
Yeah.
64 communities that could be benefiting from this
Exactly.
revenue.
64, exactly.
And so $100, as you said, is a nominal amount of money.
Right.
For an entire year or 9
Right.
months worth. I think when I saw you a few weeks ago, I mentioned to you that I'm trying to explore, and I shared this with John, is the occupancy
Yes,
theory.
Yeah.
Behind your methodology, I'm thinking, can we do it with occupancy? So
yeah.
I'll let you know how we make out.
Yeah, that's a good one. And I think the other thing to bear in mind is it's gonna be tough to get the privates to go along, because that would be more or less voluntary. There's nothing on the $100 fee. But we did not pursue it at the SUNY level. So we didn't present a case to SUNY and say, wouldn't this be a reasonable thing to do in terms of all that you
You
did?
did not. go to
We did
SUNY.
not. We did not go to SUNY.
You know, from the municipality perspective, it's a no-brainer. Some of the things you run into besides the legislators having their students, you know, having to pay for it from their area is that you run into a SUNY will probably, I don't know how they'll respond, but they could respond negatively because they are in the enrollment crunch right now. They are desperate.
Sorry.
For students.
The privates are far worse than what SUNY's good. I know that.
Absolutely. And so anything that increases
Yeah.
cost to the families
Exactly. Yeah.
is a negative. to them
Right.
Because,
Right.
you know, that's where it's at.
That shouldn't hurt you from trying.
Exactly. I agree 100%, but I'm just saying that
Yeah, it's
it's
tough.
a no-brainer
It's
from
tough.
our perspective, but we have to.
Alternately, you have a new governor who's running for election, and she will be needing a lot of votes from upstate New York.
SUNY chance.
We can talk politics for the rest of the night, though, but that should probably wait until we go to the autumn afterwards.
Yeah. No, I mean, I will see what I can find out.
Well, thank you for having me, and I'd be happy to come back if you want. Again, let me know if it would help to update the numbers and
I
everything.
think we should, if you don't mind, have one of your staff update the numbers,
Yeah.
because if we're gonna present to the SUNY chancellor.
Yeah.
If we're
It's good to have
cutting
it.
this down, if it does go to the SUNY chancellor, then we want to have complete numbers.
Okay,
We'll see what NICOP says.
good.
You got staff.
No, that would be students.
Because I'm jealous.
Now, I shouldn't say this in front of, I shouldn't say this in front of staff. But I think, I'm not sure I could find some, well, I could find some staff. I could get Scott to help. Scott would be capable.
I'm sure you have lots of things.
Thank you. Sorry to run off, but I have
That's
another.
very good to see you.
Okay.
He's not on my computer skills.
You have computer skills?
No, that's what I'm saying.
Carrie's glad she's wearing a mask.
It's behind Mark, so I'm sure he's a little bit loud.
They moved my office where I'm right in the middle of IT, so I can just yell out the word.
Okay, let's go down to C, part-timer.
In fact, is a part-time wage schedule for 2022. This is something that needs to be adopted for anticipation of 2022.
How much does that change from the previous one that you sent us?
The previous discussion regarding the part-time wage schedule in recent weeks was regarding adding 2 positions that weren't previously listed on. Jane, can you speak to what the increases were from
Sure.
21 to 22?
Sure, thank you, Greg. The minimum wage currently is at $12.50, and as of December 31st of 2021, it will go up 70 cents, so it'll go up to $13.20. So what we did in the grid is we basically adjusted almost every title by the 70 cents
Mhm.
and just increased the range from being a $2 range to a $3 range. You will see some of the positions where we thought it was already at a marketable value. So we did not increase some of the higher paid part-time positions. And just so you know, these rates have been incorporated in the 2022 tentative.
Any questions? Topic B, the maintenance worker appointment.
We have several openings currently in DPW. We got the interviews and have 3 applicants that we've made offers to for maintenance worker appointments. Acceptance. We have Work Streets crew. He states they a great guy. And they're currently vacant budget position.
How many? And these are full-time?
3, yes, full time.
3 full-time.
We have 1 other pending, same crew, pending vacancy, and we have another vacancy down in water and sewer crew
Why are they vacant?
due to employees leaving.
Is this something recent?
The anticipated vacancy in water and sewer crew is not recent, that's been anticipated for a while now, but the other ones are recent.
And do you do an exit interview with them?
I did not, perhaps the personnel director will do that. Typically.
Is it because of salary, benefits, working conditions?
I can't say on these particular ones. I haven't followed up on it at this point. I think generally speaking, it's finding jobs that pay better. Perhaps a particular employee doesn't value the benefits that the city provides as much as they may value the hourly pay. It tends to be something. Obviously, there's a big particular employee.
So at these three positions, if you were basing that laterally to a private, how much of an hourly difference are we talking?
I can't say without doing further research on that. Specific situation.
Question?
For me,
Hearing none, we'll move that up.
It would be good to have you report back on the, what we do on the next years. It would be good to report back on what is learned from exit interviews.
I don't know. There are benefits that are not attractive as an hourly rate. I understood last year why people left, but this year, I'm struggling to understand why they're leaving.
Put information out.
D, micro enterprise grant application, seeker review.
Sure, so we submitted an application for a new micro enterprise grant last week. And so this is just allowing us to be able to move that ahead when we get ready for application. So we'll be presenting a seeker type 2 resolution for council, which means there's no further environmental review needed because the micro enterprise grants are just for equipment purchases and things like that.
So this is just for the 22 grant applications.
Yeah, it's just for the micro enterprise grant, which would be actually a 2021 program year, I think. It might actually even be the 2020 year, we don't know yet, but yeah, it's for the newest one that we'll have. We should be able to have it roll out in this winter at some point, hopefully early winter.
First
If
quarter.
we get funded,
First quarter.
hopefully.
Any other questions for Judy? Hearing none, we'll move on to the local community development grant program.
We updated the program as you requested, and we sent out a draft to you. We also created a draft application for you to review. And what we added to it from the last council is we added that it would be an annual distribution of approximately $25,000 per year.
Mhm.
And then we also added just a few little tweaks here and there as far as eligibility and different terms and conditions. But we also added, more importantly, the review committee guidelines. We put a metric on the last page for them to be able to score the applications. And then we also, as I said, provided you with a draft application for your feedback. And, you know, also Dave Merzig gave me some feedback today. There's a couple areas that he would just like us to make a little bit more definite as far as, he said that we really don't need to put in that any illegal activities are not eligible. He said that that's an automatic.
Mhm.
So, you know, so he's going to just tweak a couple of those sentences for us, just so they're more appropriate in the narrative. But once that is done, if the committee supports this program, we would like to get it moved forward because we do already have a couple applicants that are ready to apply. But we'll just need to hear back from you to see if you would like any other further changes.
Mark, do you have any suggestions?
the suggestions, just the things I
through with me. I think this is really interesting, exciting. I think this is a really great program. I hope that we can think about how to extend this obviously beyond just the time that we have this money for. I mean, this is pretty cool opportunity for the residents like that.
John?
I have no questions. It's worth further consideration.
Question, Jimmy.
Yes,
This is a minimum of 10% of the total project cost must be provided at the owner's equity in the form of cash. So that means that we would be willing to fund 90% of the cost of the amount.
well, it would depend, yes, it would depend on, it's just a minimum of 10%. It doesn't mean it has to be only 10%.
I think that's excessive myself. I mean, 50%, I think is generous, but to say somebody would put on an event and we pay for 90% of it, that sounds excessive to me.
We can always change that. What we were thinking of was the small person, you know, who, a perfect example is, say they needed a facade repair and they didn't get into the actual program where we were doing the facades. And it was gonna cost them $5,000. And then, you know, if we asked them for 10%, that would be $500 bill to them, and then $4,500, that would benefit the entire Main Street area because the facade would be better. So that's why we were thinking minimum, not only. But we could always raise that, Mayor.
Well, you know, experience shows us that skin in the game is important. And the people who don't have skin in the game often do things that they wouldn't do otherwise, and are confident would benefit them otherwise, and the success rate of people who don't have skin in the game is less than people who do.
No, it's
And
not.
that's just my personal, it's up to the council, but that's my personal.
No, we can put any criteria that, you know, that you would like in there. It was just a suggestion at the time.
So hearing that, but also trying to think about smaller projects that might, and I understand it's going to be, might there be a kind of a threshold that we say between here and here it's 10%, and then above this particular, then it's 50% or whatever you might want. And that way, as the kind of the grant increases, the skin in the game, to use your analogy there, increases, but for the smaller kind of projects, it's a smaller. I'm trying to think about things where, you know, maybe people have a proposal to try to do some kind of beautification of a particular area of the city, or traffic island or something, making something up there. You know, and they're looking for flowers for $200. I mean, it's, you know, just be able to say $20 and get in 10% of that. Throwing out there as a suggestion to try to make this work.
Well, a schedule probably would be helpful. My suggestions were back up on page 1, was eligibility. I think of all the existing businesses and not-for-profits been here grinding it out for decades, and yet there's no eligibility acknowledgement of that. So I would like to see that someone has to be a resident or business owner or a not-for-profit for at least a year in the city of Oneonta before they're eligible.
At
And
least
then-
here.
And then down to your review metrics, is that there would be a sliding scale saying, if you've been here for 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, you get X amount of more points than someone that just moved to the area.
I'm gonna push back on that one, Len. As a relative new person here, been here 20 years, and I'm reminded all the time, I'm still a newcomer, which frankly is quite offensive. I don't wanna sit there and not score somebody who comes into our city with a bunch of ideas and a lot of excitement and things that they want to get involved, and all of a sudden we say, oh, you haven't lived here for 20 years, therefore you're gonna get less points. We're trying to encourage new people to come into this community. I just don't like the idea of you know, favoring those who've had longer time here versus those who are newcomers. That's my point with that one.
I'm not even sure of the constitutionality of doing that. We'd have to explore that.
Yeah, I would have to ask Dave Morzick that to see if it's actually legal. It could be a discrimination charge.
To say that we're going to give extra points to the YMCA because they've been here for 50, 60, 100 years,
No,
rather than someone that just came to Leon.
Yeah.
I don't know how constitutionality rules there. I hear what you're saying, Mark, and I'm sorry that somebody's saying you don't count because you haven't been here for your entire life. I personally don't view it that way. All I'm saying is, I've heard it over and over and over again with small businesses, that they see a new business come in. Mama's Burrito is the one that's highlighted the most, that they just came into the area, they got a lot of money, and then they failed. Whereas there's other businesses that have been here grinding it out, and they've asked but never received.
I think we have a built-in place to be able to kind of absorb that, and that is that the highest point scale on these guidelines is the proposed benefit to the Oneida community. And I imagine that the review committee might take a look at a proposal that was going to benefit a particular business versus a proposal that is going to have a higher impact on the community and would weigh accordingly. I'm happy to let the review committee kind of use that particular scale and that weight there accordingly to judge what's beneficial to the larger community. And I think that would be, kind of work its way out. So we don't have to have any type of how long have you been here metric, but we can say, what's the benefit, the true benefit to the Oneida community? And the review committee is tasked with trying to assess that particular benefit. And I think that if we're looking at what's going to have the greatest impact on this community, if that's the metric, I'm comfortable with that metric.
I'm not, I want to see the existing businesses have a little bit more of an edge than the ones that are just showing up. Case in point is, Judy, I mean no disrespect, but you're going to bring up the very first item, the yoga, correct? And so this yoga is going to come into town, and I've already heard a lot of blowback about this one, is that they haven't made residency here,
She
and
lives
yet we're
here.
going to give them money.
She lives here. One of the owners lives here.
That information wasn't provided to us before.
And has a studio here.
And her husband has 2 businesses here.
I don't remember hearing that information.
well, we
before.
haven't provided that to you yet because we don't have this program established yet. We don't have an application. We have been in contact with her. She's going to write a written proposal and we'll be bringing it to the committee on the 16th.
I think it's an interesting debate, and there's certainly value to both sides. I tend to agree with Mark that the ultimate factor is how it would benefit the community, how it would benefit the city, not who is applying for it. And that's where constitutionality comes in. Once you start deciding who gets money based upon who is applying for it, as opposed to what they're proposing to do, then it starts to question whether it's discriminating or constitutional.
It's not the only factor in this matrix. It's just one that gives you an additional point or two.
And I don't know, that's somebody else.
So I guess if you ask Dave Mercer to see if it's,
Sure, I can ask. And as far as the percentage, would you like it to go up to 50% instead of the
That's
10?
my personal feeling. I leave it up to, it's not my decision.
Or would you like to go with Mark's idea where there's a scale depending on how much the grant is? Or,
I lean towards Gary's thinking that you gotta have skin in the game. The ones that don't do it aren't successful. I would like to see the percentage higher. I was trying to think of the $200 mark, but I don't think they're gonna come to us for $200.
I'm just trying to propose that maybe we think about smaller grants that
That's where your sliding scale would come into play. So if we had a sliding scale based on the amount of the project,
I think we can't imagine what our residents could do creatively, given an opportunity to create a grant or get some grant money to be able to help improve the community. Leave that open for folks that don't have the means or don't have the kind of backing of a nonprofit or that type of organization. They are in that very last bullet of eligibility, second bullet there. They're just residents of the city of Montgomery.
Now, the problem is if you can get 90% paid for, everybody applies whether it's a good idea or not. And, you know, if you have to put up some of your own money, you think carefully about what you're going to do to make sure it's going to be successful, because if it's not successful, like any other business, you know, investment, you may lose money. So people put much more thought into what they're going to do.
Mhm.
If they, you know, if you have nothing to lose, you don't put a lot of thought into what you're proposing.
Well, even with this, we can brainstorm different options to bring back to you, but one thing that we could consider is that a minimum of 50% with like a maximum or minimum amount, you know, so it's 50% or this dollar amount type thing. But we can brainstorm different ideas and bring it back.
And then, was this the program we were talking about that we were gonna ask, somebody was gonna ask the DO? Judy, were you gonna talk to DO about this?
No,
This isn't the program?
that was the other, that was the application that would be coming in. Deal was mentioned there, but.
Okay.
It
wasn't this program.
No, but I had a comment, if I can. With the match, we've indicated the cash match. If we increase the match, I think we should say a certain percentage of the match has to be cash, the rest could be a loan. Or however, but they just need to show how they're coming up with a match, but I think it's unrealistic to expect a cash match if we're going like $7,500 local match and $7,500 grant. That $7,500 is a lot for people to show as cash for some of our businesses, so. We have to just tweak that too.
And that's what we do with the downtown food.
What's the percentages there, Gary?
Well, that was what Mark had suggested. We had a scale percent where if it was a, you probably know. my
Yeah,
point.
it's zero match up to $10,000. 10,000 to 20,000 was 50 or 75% grant, 25% match. Over 20,000 was 50-50.
But the difference is also that that was only for very specific physical improvements.
Right, besides
This-
signs and upper.
This
floor
is
housing.
for, you know, which are permanent improvements. This could be for somebody who wants to put on a weekend festival. And then they can put on a weekend festival for $10,000, we pay $9,000 of it. And the whole thing could be, you know, a flop, or it's like paying for $9,000 for $10,000 festival is different than a sign.
Is that something that we could address then? If it's an event, we're looking at this percentage, if it's an actual part of a structure, it's another?
Yeah, well, part of the application too is to submit a budget for whatever they're asking for. And then the committee will have the ability to say, the budget is showing that, you know, like they're going to make a profit of some sort. And, you know, we don't want to contribute as much because of the profit line, or the budget will show that this piece of equipment is going to cost them this amount of money. So the committee, in the application itself, they'll have a lot of information to work with to base their decision upon.
I think there's a problem here now that you talk about it, Jenny, that we will be having people competing to do very, very different things than what you just brought up, which is what I mentioned with Judy, is that one person is going to be asking for money to put up a sign. Somebody else is going to be asking money to do a yoga event. And that yoga event may be a big money maker. And, you know, do we want to spend $10,000 just so that event organizer's profit is high? You know, because maybe they're making $20,000. I'm not saying that's the case with some, but I'm
Right.
saying you could have somebody who's going to do an event, it's good for the city. It's going to be profit maker for them. They just want to make 30,000 instead of 20,000, so they want. Whereas a sign doesn't generate revenue.
Right.
So I almost wonder if we don't have to have separate, if you want to have fund all of these different types of things, not just events. You want to fund, you know, physical improvements, you want to fund all the other things. You may have to have separate programs, because you're competing apples and oranges here for the same money.
Agreed.
Okay.
Just a question in terms of what sort of financial resources would we want to set aside for this
We have
in a given year?
Well, right now, we have what I call old program income monies from old CDBG grants. We have a little over 100,000 in the fund right now, and our proposal is to commit 100,000 to start this with. And then as we get in more revenues over the years, we can replenish it if this program is a success. If it's not, we can just stop it. But by limiting it to 25,000, it will give us a 4-year period to see how many applicants we get, to see how much interest there is, and to see if it is successful. And then it will just give us an opportunity, another way to help the city residents. And then as more revenues come in, and also with what I call the new HUD money, if that is determined to be, we have a threshold of $35,000. If we receive more than 35,000 of the new program income, we actually have to send it back to the state. But if it's under 35,000, we submit a report, the state releases it, and then those funds are called miscellaneous revenues. And we can choose to put those monies into the fund also, or for another use. So we have options in the future. They're not guaranteed, but there are options out there.
So I'm looking at the guide, well, it doesn't have a page number, but it's where you say eligible uses of fund, and there's a thought process. It says arts, culture, and recreation, and tourism. Not quite sure what you were thinking of, public-private partnerships within tourism. But it seems as though tourism and arts are similar, and that economic development, community development are similar, giving you.
Yeah. We actually took these narratives right from the comprehensive plan. We went to the comprehensive plan under these different titles,
Mhm.
and we tried to make it generic from what the goals in the comprehensive plan were.
So if we used the top two with a balance of 12.5 and the bottom two with a balance of 12.5. Two different programs within the program.
That's an idea. Sure. We can.
I think that makes it really difficult because you don't know if you'll get those applications in, and you only have $25,000. So I don't think I tie it to I'd split the amount, but maybe we can split the parameters and the guidelines more.
Well,
Or the type or
I agree
something?
with Lemon tying to the amount because people are competing. Otherwise, people are doing very different things or somehow competing for the same one. And that, no, fair doesn't make sense. How does a committee look at, we're gonna fund this, there's $25,000. We like this application to fund, it ranks higher than this one. When they're so different, how can you even compare the value, how much value one has versus the other one? One is asking for sign and one is asking for an event. And one may be doing something that generates revenue with one, it's just, you're competing, I don't think you can barely compete for the same sum of money. I mean, when you look at grants, you apply for grants, it's never done that way. You don't, the same competition doesn't go for, a water treatment plant, that goes for a grant for something unrelated.
We can design categories. I think that's very doable, depending on the type, and we can even put dollar limits on it. We could come up with something.
I understand the concern that there's not that much money. But, I don't know how else to do it.
Is it better to do a bunch of little projects, or is it better to do a big project? I think that's the one thing that the committee's gonna have to come up with.
Yeah, that's a good point too. That's a very good point.
And again, I think it depends on the applications you get. So, you know, if, and depending on, you know, how they come in or how many come in or when they come in, will depend on the decisions to be made.
Yeah, this is tough, because Scott is right. What is the maximum grant that we give?
15.
15,000. Some decision is, what's more important, how do you decide? How do you judge a $500 request with a $15,000 request as to which one is more important? There's a lot to work out.
Was it where it's already?
Come back working on that.
One thing we know is that if we give out money and it isn't extremely well thought out, you're gonna be sorry you gave out money.
Oh, I
Because
understand.
you're gonna make more people unhappy than happy. That will happen even if it's well thought out, but if it's not very carefully thought out. It turns out more to be a negative than positive.
Any other suggestions or thoughts from the chair? Topic F, potential sale of city-owned property.
So engineering department has continued working on updating this map. It's slightly updated from last year. You're not gonna be able to read the text on that. I apologize. I can send it around, but it's still in draft form. Essentially what we've done is identify all city property, not just in the city, as it's shown there, but also in the town. Our next step will be to go through and analyze any existing utility easements that might be going across those properties and kind of identify, whittle it down and probably highlight it a little bit differently so we can show you the properties that these might have potential for being sold. Obviously, we're not gonna look at selling City Hall, I think, or Hoover Park. You never know, but we can kind of narrow your focus and then bring some more detailed information about the properties, some photographs, some book narrative description. And then you can have a conversation about the specific one.
I don't know, City Hall could be a couple of.
Greg, in your estimation, do we have anything here that, might be of interest or
I think there's less than a handful of parcels that might be of interest. Not many that are possibly buildable at this point in time. Most of the, there's probably 10 or 12 that are maybe more than that, probably more than that. Little tiny parcel that I didn't know the size. It would be maybe someone who owns an adjacent property would take that, but it's not something that would be on its own buildable. There's like I said, less than a handful that it might be actually worth something to someone. There are some others that, for other reasons, we wouldn't want to sell. That's where we'll kind of summarize those reasons in the chart.
We sold that little triangle at the Hartford College about 4 years ago, above the wall. But just that reason, it was of no value to us. And so we asked Hartford College saying, probably more value to you to prevent somebody from doing something ugly on something.
What'd you have for?
90,000.
Nice. Greg, how many acres is that the city owns down by the bus garage, the city school bus garage? That's a large chunk of land. And to Mark's point, we kind of, I'm curious of what future thoughts were on that large parcel. Even this map doesn't show all of the city property because that's annexed. The city on the island.
There's an insert, and it's supposed to see that on the bottom right. Parcel would be known as in the city there, the parcel that's in the town actually.
Right. It used to be used many years ago for soccer. I think there was youth soccer down there, but I haven't seen anything down there in it's just 6 years.
Soccer club that's the area is not, obviously a sizable piece of property, it's not really buildable. As far as the structure, it could be, but it's in plus on. So potentially agricultural use, there's farming fields adjacent to that.
Somebody's still mowing.
We still mow it, clear.
And the soccer goals are still stacked up there.
That hasn't been a use for them.
Right. What about making that into another community garden type thing? Because that seems to be the draw that people want to do, maybe.
We could look at that. I think, you know, we should do a little research outreach to the community and see where they would like to see community gardens. I think ideally we would have them close to where people can walk to right in the neighborhoods as opposed to having to drive. I mean, possibly expanding where there's room to expand the.
Is there maybe somebody that wants a parcel a little bit bigger than what they could get, like, down by Riverside, because they're kind of small parcels. Maybe somebody that's looking for a bigger one that would like to go down, you know, plant a corn or something. Just an idea, if it's not really buildable.
Probably
just-
rich soil there.
But isn't the Susquehanna Greenway part of that particular tract?
Right, so we'd have to be careful with that. The
Right.
Greenway does, you know, go along the river there, and then it cuts through, the end of that parcel.
Right. So I think looking for alternative uses might be the better thinking there rather than selling it.
Or composting.
Yeah. And then I'm sorry, I did chuckle because I remember back in the day, coaching soccer and playing in that field, and it was really interesting whenever the water table was high, we had to deal with quite a bit of water in those fields.
So I think we had talked about this, Greg, early on, kind of setting up some parameters or matrix of what's going to qualify the land. So you mentioned utilities. What else are you looking at?
For instance, there's a few parcels, 2 parcels in town of Oneonta, this little leg that comes across, which is known as Webb Island, which is basically the end of the Catella Park. That I don't think it makes any sense to encourage development there because it's in a flood zone. UL Park and Catella Park are designed to flood and make it flood with that. And as you know, from the fire department, you know, there's times where those people would need to evacuate or, you know, avoid flood waters. So I don't think we'd want to sell the parcel in there. I think that's the place where we would, you know, want to maintain ownership and possibly for passive parkland in the future if possible. There might be some other areas where it just doesn't make sense to develop. Steep slopes.
So flooding, steep slopes. Okay. Any other questions? What?
Appreciate looking into it.
Yeah. Sure. Curious where this is gonna go.
Come back with more detailed information.
So let's, going on to topic G, looks like we're increasing the auditing contract $750 per year. For the
Yeah,
next 3 years.
Yes,
Is that what they did 3 years ago?
it is for the first year, it is a $3,000 increase going from 37 to 40. And then it's a 2% increase after that. The reason being is I've told you before that when they did their 5-year contract back in 2015, I think it was, for the auditing services for the year of 2016, it was based on what we call fund financials, which was just basic financials, almost like our annual report that we submit to the state. We have since converted to GASB 34, which I've mentioned to the committee before. It requires tremendously a lot more work and effort and guidelines and meeting regulations and testing and things. So the amount of time that the auditors put into the audit is a lot more than back, 5 years ago when they did it. So we're at the end of that 5-year contract. And according to the RFP, we're allowed to extend it for 3 years in 1-year increments. And so I also confirmed with Dave Merzick if we could do all 3 years at the same time. And he said, yes, we could with council approval. And so that is why in front of you right now is an extension for those last 3 years. And
So from your perspective, what would be, or why wouldn't you want to go out to bid?
well, you go out to bid, and we would have to go out to bid after these 3 years. You go out to bid because, one, you want to make sure that you're being charged a fair price. So you look at all of the different proposals and see what they have. You also want to look at qualifications. Say, for example, the partnerships changed at BST or the staff changed at BST, and I wasn't happy with what I was getting through the audit, and I would come to you saying, we no longer can, I recommend that we no longer have this one, we need to go out for RFP. And just so you know, there are cancellation options if we need to terminate the contract. So then you also look for qualifications of the staff that is currently providing the services. One of the great pluses for BST back when they originally got the contract is they had so many state contacts that they had great resources and great people that they were able to work with. And a number of the state people that retired from the state actually went to work for BST. So it was a number of combinations, but you always want to go out to bid just to make sure that you've got one, the best deal for the taxpayers, and two, that you are keeping current with your options. And it's just like when we do any RFP, and that's why Dave Merzick says you don't usually go for contracts more than 5 years, because it's good practice to keep it current and to keep the competition down.
But I think Glenn's question is, why would you not go out for?
Right, because
Why
you mean-
would you go
we
out
did
for-
3
why
years
would you
with them.
not?
Right, why are we not going out to bid? We did 3 years with them. And just what I agree with everything that you just said, so in the best interest of the city taxpayers, wouldn't we want to know that the $40,000 that they want to elevate to is the best price?
We can do that. We have that option, and I even talked about it last week when I got the proposal. I said we could do an RFP instead. It is more work, and that's fine. But I'm sorry if I misunderstood your question. But yeah, no, we can go out for RFP if that's what you would prefer to do.
Well, there is another thing which I've heard in the past. Another reason for not staying too long with the same auditor is that as auditors get to know you better, they tend to feel like they know you. So therefore, they don't feel a need to dig as hard. And while we don't want people finding bad things, we do want to know if we have a problem.
Right.
And there's a general tendency that better people get to know and trust you, sometimes the more they assume that everything's okay.
Well, the only thing that I would counter that with, Mayor, is that there are many criteria in the audit that they have to document that they reviewed and tested. And quite often, because the city of Oneonta's audit is a true audit in the true sense of the word, that when BST gets audited by their peers, quite often they will pick the city of Oneonta's audit to go through. So, and also with the staff changes over the years, we do have fresh people looking at our audit. And I will forewarn you that if and when the day comes that we change auditing firms, it will be a massive amount of work for the first few years because of all of the building of all of the files that we would no longer have access to for the prior year's work. And so that is one aspect that really saves the city a lot because it's already established. But there's no problem if you prefer to go out for RFP, we can do that. That's no problem at all.
I just think we have options. We can go out for an RFP. If the prices come back to where they're so high, we can still extend with BSD.
I believe we could. I would have to confirm that, but I believe we could. I don't know if going out for RFP then negates the extension possibility, but I could confirm that.
I mean, we're still within our contract with them right now.
Yes, yes.
I just want to go, what do you guys want to do? You want to extend for 3 years or do you want to?
I'm confused. Why wouldn't we have access to the files the year before? There are.
No, when we exchange, if we were to change auditors,
Yeah, again, I'm just confused.
No,
What
no, the
files
BST
are we talking about? Because our financials are still our financials that
Maybe I'm not explaining it correctly, but you have to build resources. So, for example, let's just take our bond issues. All of those bond issues, BST already has in their, what they call their permanent file. Our charter is in their permanent file. All of our union contracts are in their permanent files. It's all of those type of things, and we would just have to rebuild those all. It's not impossible, it's just a lot of work, that's all.
So wouldn't it be, we already have like I don't know, this kind of like, I'm just thinking, because I'm at work, even when we change, we have the files, they're on the thumb drive, we can just hand that thumb drive over.
Oh,
they
no,
can put it in.
BST's files are theirs. It's not, they're,
No, but I'm talking about, we have a thumb drive that has our, like, mission statement, so it'll be the same as the charter. We have our contracts, which is in there, so you can hand that information over.
yeah, well, I'm gonna just.
So I guess that's where I'm getting
Yeah.
confused, I guess you're saying the new company have to build their own file that like this other company.
For example, the last 2 years, we've done the remote audit. This year, I uploaded over 500 files to the auditors just to audit 2020's financial records. So the amount of data is intense.
So is it a lot more work for you to do a remote audit?
Not really, because, no, not really, because I would be supplying that anyway. It would just be on site instead of, uploading it.
Because I'm
So-
wondering, as hopefully we're exiting COVID, should we be stipulating, is it in our best interest to stipulate that future audits take place in person, as they always did before COVID?
Well, I asked the auditors that, and they said that they're leaving it up to the client what their preference is. So if the client wants them on site, they'll be on site. If the client wants them to be remote, they'll be remote. I actually think a hybrid would be really good, because I would still be able to upload a lot of the documents to them that they could work on just in their office themselves, and then be on site just for a couple of days instead of the entire week.
I mean, they're obviously saving money by doing it remotely, so, if it's, we should be saving that money, not them.
Absolutely.
That's exactly what I thought was gonna happen for last year, but it didn't.
Last year. Then when you use, because of COVID, then you pay more.
Correct. That's what Jenny's saying, is the remote costs us more. I agree with Carrie, it seems as though we would have saved money, but they said that they spent more time in research because they weren't here.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, because you don't have travel, you don't have hotel, you don't have meals, you don't have.
Each way has got pluses and minuses. Being on site, having full attention of the finance department for, the entire week it condenses the audit. Doing it remotely, they don't have my full attention, because when they're working remote, I might be in a meeting or,
So is this extension, because you just said you prefer a hybrid model?
oh no, I was talking about hybrid of, if, say next year, we don't have to do remote because COVID is settled. What they're telling me is that if we still want to continue it remotely, they'll honor that, or if we want them on site, they'll honor that. It's our discretion.
And same price.
Yes, for the same price.
Can I just ask one more question before thoughts on that? Jenny, thanks, I'm sorry for all this time here with this, but you kind of mentioned one about the record keeping. What are the other benefits to maintaining this contract right now with BST? Or
Well,
extending the contract?
One is our working relationship. The resources that BST brings to the city is quite valuable. We have good working relationships. They know the records. So, when I have an accounting question, they already know the city's history. They know the city's funds. So it's an easy conversation. And I know the quality of the audit that we get, and I know the quality of services that we get. Their standard of work product is extremely high, and that benefits us. when whoever's reviewing our audit sees the BST name on it, that holds a lot of weight.
Jenny, have we ever had, can you recall, have we ever had an auditor that did not do a good job?
So in my tenure here, no, I've had different auditors that did not stay long with BST. And that must have been for a reason that obviously I don't know about.
I mean, firms that we ever hire a firm that we did not hire as they were.
Not that I know of, I will.
Generally, these audit firms are all.
Yeah, yeah. And, I've had auditors where I can explain something once and they get it, and I've had auditors where I've had to explain the same thing several times and they don't get it. So it's just a matter of the person themselves.
So I guess if asked to the committee, do you want to RFP this or do you want
I got a follow-up question first before I put my own. How long have we used this present firm?
For many years. When we have gone out to bid several times and they have won the bid every time. And when we go out for RFP, we usually have 5 different individuals rate the proposals. And then there's a weighted score, and whoever gets the highest score is usually the one that gets the recommendation.
The comptroller's office has no requirement of a maximum number of consecutive years if you use the same auditor.
I've never seen anything like that. And also, just so you know, municipal government audit work, there's not a lot of firms that do that. I just want that out there. Because government financials are unique, and not all firms have the staff that understands the financial reporting for governments, or the GAAP regulations, or the GASB regulations. It is I want to say it is I want to use the word unique again, but that's the only thing that comes to my mind. It is a unique set of knowledge and talents that have to go into that type of financial reporting.
So present the question to the committee, do you want to RFP this or do you want to, this board to council under extending the contract potentially up to 3 years?
I'm in favor of sending it to council and extending the contract for 3 years with the understanding that after that, we would still have to go to RFP. What rang to me in that one was the time. Our staff who review RFP and that whole process right now. We'll have to do it 3 years regardless.
I would be in favor of RFP only because we've been with the firm for a very long time, and I think getting some fresh eyes on it never seems to hurt. I think that's,
I'm comfortable staying with the firm for 3 years. I don't have a preference. It just seems a bit cumbersome. It would be a cumbersome time to never change that. I'm comfortable keeping it this way. If the direction is to do an RFP, that's fine. I don't know if there's any, it sounds as if there's no evidence that things will get cheaper or better, or, that. And we won't have any idea that any of those benefits materialize anyway. I don't know what the council.
I view it as, if we go to RFP, we'll find out whether BST actually wants to do the work or not. They've been our firm for several years. They've obviously won several RFPs through the years. I think Jenny, you said that there's not that many firms that want to come to Indiana or do this type of work because it's so specialized. But for me, I would like to go with an RFP. It's kind of like insurance. After many years, you should review with your insurance company, go out to bid for your insurance companies, and we do that all the time. So with our auditor, I just feel that would be in best interest to go out and any given RFP. So problem we have tonight though is it's a 2-2 to the committee, so where the tiebreaker is.
I'm not a member of the committee, I don't know the authority, but,
Flip a quarter.
I am comfortable going with the RFP unless Jenny says there's a disadvantage to doing that.
The advantage of doing an RFP is that and say BST wins the RFP again, we can just set them up with another 5-year contract. But the reason that in RFPs there's extensions is for the convenience of both parties. And for example, with the IT RFP that we just awarded to Pyramid, we had extended their contract up to the maximum amount before we had to go out for RFP again. And we've had Pyramid for several years. But it is something that you do have to do periodically, just to make sure that you have all of your legal ducks in a row. So I'm fine with going out with the RFP. I'm also fine with extending it.
Well, we're ending a 5-year contract for them.
Yes.
So if we take our legal advice from our attorney, which means we shouldn't do more than 5 years, then the smartest thing for us to do, following his legal advice, is to go out for RFP.
And it's true, is it true that this firm may win the contract?
Oh, yeah, they may, but I have to be objective. When I see the RFPs, I have to grade them, each one on the same basis, and that's why we have a weighted scale. And just so you know, usually the weighted scale, the price is the last thing that you look at, and it's only 10% of the score. So even if BST's price comes in higher than other firms, that's not the deciding factor, because there's several other categories.
and in there, while I got both kind of committee, I will say, hearing you say, Jim, that you're fine either way. And we've been hearing that we've been doing business with this auditing firm for as long as anybody can possibly remember. That probably being comfortable with them is not a good reason not to get bids from others.
All right, we'll go out, I'll have the purchasing agent tomorrow start the RFP process. We're just gonna have to, get it in place, so I know who I'm working with next year for this year's audit. And we'll do that.
Thank you. Moving on to topic H, the grant application for the water treatment plant improvements.
This is just a reminder, I was going to talk about this the whole time in this committee. Recently, council, you see the actual resolution to apply for the grant, as well as resolution, bond authorization, as well as the agreement for bond council and agreement for local council being our city attorney. So several motions on the agenda for that. The total project estimated cost again will be 5.6 something million. Sorry, not exactly, just about 5.6 million. Our maximum grant we could be eligible for the WIA grant program is 3 million. So the 2.6, what we would be seeking a low or no interest loan, or potentially bond. So our bond authorization will be up to that 2.6.
So I may have missed that, distraction by my next discussion. What is the total cost of the project?
The total estimate is 5.6 million.
Of the total,
Total project, we can get up to 3 million from the FC to the water infrastructure.
so okay, got it. So the loan, and the loan could be how much?
2.6.
So if we get, we'll take the loan, no need to bond. Right?
Correct. The decision between loan or bond would be essentially being based on what's the
Whichever is best. Okay.
And Mayor, you still need the bond resolution no matter which financing source you go
But if we
to.
can get a 0% loan, we would cover the whole thing without bonding.
If the bond, if you don't get no interest, we get low interest, it depends what the interest rate is.
Jenny, you'll probably say you can't answer this, but you know, I've been just doing a lot of thinking about our debt service, and I know this is from the water fund, not the general fund, but, I do a lot of thinking about our debt service. I mean, our current debt service is somewhere around $500,000-$600,000 a year that, you know, that we have to pay. And I know we have a lot of projects that are lined up. I don't have a sense of, so if you do a bond for 2.5 million, I guess it's 30 years, whatever it may be. Do you have a ballpark figure of what is the debt service on 2.5 million?
Mayor, I do, and I'm putting together a presentation for the meeting tomorrow night. And I'm actually going to be doing a report listing all of the unfunded projects that we're speaking about and showing you what that total is. And then I have from our bond council, 3.5 million up to, I think, maybe 5 million at 3% at a 20-year and what it would show the debt. So I'll be providing that information tomorrow night.
That's great, Jim.
Okay, and then that way I will give you a picture of, this is everything that we're talking about. This is how much it's going to cost for this dollar amount. We may have to pick and choose. But that's kind of what I want to give the council tomorrow night.
Perfect, thank you.
You're welcome.
That concludes the list of items on our agenda. Is there anyone that has anything that they would look at?
This is what I want to hear, so that your attendees could actually see his Christmas tree that he sent. to us.
Hey, no. I did that off my phone, that's all.
Yeah. What do you think of that, Mike? Christmas wreath, that's
I was interested to hear his thinking.
Well, okay, well, here's the thing. So in the 6th ward, we have 2 different ways into the city in the 6th ward. And over one used to be Kane's Grocer, used to be a long time ago, or forever since I've grown up, used to have a holiday decoration that goes away, which is garland and a light. And I've been approached by residents in the 6th ward trying to get that back. The electric hookup is there. I started talking with Greg about a year ago about this because they were bringing it up. And when they started bringing it up last year, there just wasn't enough time to really get anything forward. And we're still going through COVID and stuff. And so in talking with Greg and stuff, it's like, we both kind of agreed that it shouldn't just be 2 of us that calls. I'd rather this goes up or doesn't go up if it comes from the city. Is to put up a reef like used to be up there, the garden, it's lighted. That's why I sent you pictures, it's like a lighted garland, one has one like a candle in it, the other one has, John, look, I don't know. And one's just the garland that's lit up. You know, they're about $2,000 in the world. You know, I mean, you could go as high as whatever you want. And we always light up down Main Street. But since the residents are asking for it to come back, and they wanted it, and talking with Greg, I just thought it was fair to bring up to a committee. Because we're wondering, like, if we just did it, then all of a sudden there's snowball and stuff like that. So the thing is just to if we can, because Greg can transfer the money. Wouldn't have to go up to council, but if this committee would say, yes, it's okay, go ahead and do this for the residents of the 6th ward because they had one there. And they put it back, then we would get it and have it put back.
So the city would purchase it and maintain it.
Mhm.
Who pays the electric?
City already pays the electric on that pole.
I don't think the LED light is gonna use that much, but no.
So, I mean, at one time, I think Kate at the front of the grocery, the 6th ward, I can't remember if she bought that or if she did the electric for a while, because she had a car dealership across from the way. And then eventually the city took it over, absorbed it over anyway. So, and the other one just kind of, it was old, I mean, I remember it in 1980, and in the last few years, it didn't work anymore. So the residents are asking for it to be put back, so.
Thoughts?
So where will it be located?
Going over River Street, I think it's closer to River Gilbert.
Right, yeah, right by Manico. Automatic. Boy, it's a business license, I can't remember.
The better location, if you would do it, as you either enter River Street off Main Street, or as you enter the city, coming, as a welcome to the city. It seems in the middle of River Street. I know it was done because somebody did it there, but if we were gonna do it from scratch, would the middle of River Street be a sensible location?
So you're thinking gateways?
That could be fine too, it's just we already had an electric hookup there.
Mm.
That's where it was, so I just think we just put it back there. I don't know if it costs more to put a pole up, an electric up closer to up that way. I mean, that's a good point, I just, but this was already here, it's already great.
Nice way. Stall and hook up. It would be possible.
Kind of where I was curious, the same thought processes kind of gateway. So we have Main, River, Chestnut, and you have your three main gateways. I don't know how we would do lettuce highway. Well, technically, we have 4 gateways. I just don't know how you do that for.
Well, hopefully, if we are funded with the Lettuce Highway sidewalk pipeline improvement project, there's some money in there for aesthetic improvement, for the median tree planting. I think there's a little something in there for like a welcome sign or some sort. We already got a welcome sign, but some sort of in archway.
That would be something cool for the cool grant applications.
I'll put my neck out here. I don't mind the idea of having an entryway. I struggle with the fact that it's Christmas themed. I think there are many residents of our community that wouldn't, just the overtly kind of religious overtones, undertones to Christmas. I'm in preference of seasonal types of celebrations rather than just one particular religious celebration that we kind of promote here within the city and we're spending taxpayer funds on it. That's me. I recognize that doesn't sit well with a bunch of our residents, but that's what I struggle with. Because, we haven't done the same types of celebrations for other holidays, religious holidays. And so how do we want to handle that? And then are there other ways people do seasonal things rather than particular religious holidays?
I only picked these two because they were under 2,000. They do have one that's a snowflake that goes across, it's a little bit more.
Right. And
Which was more winter, and that's really kind of what originally I was going with,
right.
but I was just trying to keep
And
price down. so.
that's it's well, much better than a kind of Christmas themed expression here. And so I certainly, the question of whether we spend the money on that side, I would be more supportive of snowflakes or things like that rather than Christmas decorations.
I can send you stuff in the snowflakes if you want. I mean, it's different. There's a whole mess of different things. It's just, I was like, just trying to keep price down. I didn't even think about that.
Is it the candles, Mark?
Because they have one that doesn't have the candles. It's just an arm that goes across. I don't know if garland's like a seasonal thing. Or
I thought garland was the seasonal.
I guess I don't know what garland is, whether that is or not. I'm just looking at the description of it, but maybe the garland is. And I recognize I sound very gritty stating that, but that's.
No, no, I
understand.
understand and support the idea of trying to take one is making a gateway to the city. Rather than a sixth ward particular thing that the city is funding, unless I get one too, for seven.
That's where we were gonna go with that.
Huh?
That's where we were gonna go with that, and I knew that coming. We got 8 wards.
No, but it seems to be a very specific
Yeah.
sort of thing where for a citywide thing, it's
Right.
get all kinds of things up all over the city or use the gateways. And that has come up before in planning, that the gateways are a consideration for the improvement of the city's image.
Hmm.
Be careful about as people come into the city, there's a pleasant gateway. It's pleasant.
I would be up for the gateways. Or get them, do something.
I just sent you the snowflakes, the actual website itself.
We would have,
We need more snowflakes.
But it's, what else, there's other companies out there, it's just, you know. That's why I was saying it was the gateway, because it's not a gateway coming in.
Let me have Jimmy.
I just want to say, the purchasing agent may have access to different prices than what Len is looking at, so we could I could have him research it to see exactly what the cost would be, and then Greg and I would have to look to see where the funds would come from. But let me update you to see if there's anything on state contract for city decorations and things like that.
It's a great idea.
Are there other decorations that are going up around the city? I just can't recall whether banners or other things on flag.
We have snowflakes that go up down Main Street. I think they go up a little ways on some of the side streets maybe. Because did we extend them?
Just on
or
the
just-
Elm, maybe just past Elm, I'm not sure if they're in side streets, but basically they're on the decker.
Yeah.
Just on the
And
white
then-
pole.
DO puts up holiday banners that are in the same color scheme as our onto something. So I'm not sure when they're gonna go up, but I don't think they're up yet. But DO bought them.
So just a clarifying question, we're talking about gateways, and I heard River Street mentioned as one of the gateways. I guess what is the issue with the current location, and if you do want something on River Street, where else on River Street would we be looking at? My consideration and concern is just the cost of installing another electric hookup. We have one there, it is River Street.
I guess I was thinking of the gateways as in the 6th ward is still part of Main Street, so. At the gateway coming into the city, going out, the lower deck is part of that area. I was envisioning that, Main Street all the way up by Cemetery, where 201 Eats is gonna be. And then on Chestnut Street.
So not on River Street, on Main Street in the 6th ward, but across the DOT right away, that would be another consideration that we'd have to go through.
That's where I was,
For consideration.
well, the gateway, where the sign is in the 6th ward. Down by Dars, Old Grizzly. That's a gateway coming in. That's one of the gateways that you were talking about.
I just enjoyed it.
I know it's not River Street, but that's the second way into the 6th ward.
I only brought it up because that's where it used to be, and that's where we already have the hookups, and that was where most of the residents, they were talking to me. Kind of would see it back. I just said I'd bring it up,
I
that's,
think we could also consider down by Bassett,
yeah,
the gateway.
yeah.
Even though the city line is down by Corning, I would still call that a gateway down by Bassett.
And I think the only reason why it was where it was is because when Kate Grocer was there, she had a car dealership across, like I said, at one time, she either bought this or she did the electric at one time, and then the city eventually took it over.
She took the initiative.
Yeah, so.
She got that from the city. That was one of the city's very old decorations that they used to put on Main Street. And when we got rid of those, she got one of them. and she put it up herself. I don't know if DPW helped put it up.
Well, DPW did, because I remember seeing trucks down there.
Yeah, but that was her own piece of decoration.
So overall to the committee, what's the thoughts, to expend?
Jeannie's gonna look it up on state contracts, see if there's some on the street
Yeah, I'll ask John.
decorations.
I'll ask the purchasing
for
agent just to
the
see if
holidays.
there's what the options are.
One about the snowflakes we did.
But overall, is the committee up for expending some funds towards street decorations for the gateways?
I support looking into the idea. I'd like to know what kind of funds we're talking about. But I certainly like the idea of beautifying our gateways, with the winter theme. And seeing what those costs are, and then for that question to me, when answered, we'll certainly
What's the,
take my support.
yeah, the fact that we're having a budget discussion and continuing to look at budgetary issues.
Right.
How much time do we have to resolve the budgets and?
What are these like? I don't know, did she find something on state contract? I don't know.
You're probably at the same supply crunch as everything else. So I'm not- So,
Well, I think it would be bought this year under the budget transfer, another unspent line in this year's budget, so it won't be part of the budget negotiation.
No.
Any other items to bring up? Do we need to go into executive session? No.